Tonight, help us out if you want the hospitality and tourism industry to thrive. As rate relief comes to an end, those in the industry say they're struggling to remain viable.
And also the energy crisis, obviously it's impacted dramatically, and I think they probably tripled in the hotel.
Also making the headlines, no deal. Scottish Labour leader Anna Sarwar lays out his plans to counter an independence referendum, saying his party won't strike any deals with the SNP.
Staff at a Glasgow bar wake up to find they've lost their jobs following the sudden closure of abandoned ship.
And as preparations get underway for a busy week of gigs in Glasgow, a warning to make sure you know how you'll get home. I'm Kellyanne Woodland in Edinburgh.
And I'm Emma Cameron in Glasgow. This is the STV News at 6. Good evening. More than 200,000 Scots work in hospitality and tourism, but tonight many in the industry are calling for more help to ensure the sector remains viable.
A 50% relief on business rates for them has now come to an end, and they're being hit hard by the rising costs of energy and disruption to supply chains. Here's our senior reporter, Gordon Cree.
Tourism is the lifeblood of a place like this, and for the first time in a long time, Callander is busy with international visitors.
Where are you visiting from?
Singapore.
And it's been a long time since you could have made a trip like this, I guess.
I guess so, yeah. We've not been travelling for the last 2 years.
So why Scotland? Why Callander?
She chose the place. Yeah.
This is our third day here. So we spent 2 days in Edinburgh. Yeah, it's been nice. But very windy place here. We're trying to get used to the weather.
We're all here. She's from Michigan. I'm from Massachusetts.
Yeah, I'm from
and they're from
Boston.
the other side of Massachusetts. And my daughter Marie and Mark got married at Cross Basket Castle.
I'm keeping my fingers crossed that when I go to the airport that they're going to say, hey, would you mind taking a different flight? Because my answer will be yes. I will take the different flight if it gives me a couple more days in Scotland.
With borders around the world largely open again, this area, the gateway to the Trossachs, has become a popular destination again. But for people in the business of providing those visitors with food, drink and accommodation, it's becoming harder than ever to make that pay.
At Poppy's Hotel, they're getting ready for a full house tonight, but with temporary cuts in business rates and VAT now over and costs rising, it needs more than buoyant bookings to thrive.
Rates, relief that we had, 50%, comes to an end, and that's a major blow. VAT, haven't managed to keep that down to levels that were, we feel, competitive internationally. And also the energy crisis, obviously it's impacted dramatically, and I think they probably tripled in the hotel, the energy cost.
In the kitchen at the Laid Inn, a busy lunchtime service is good news. They also diversified during the pandemic by selling their real ale online. But Brexit is now hampering that.
I sent 3 cases to Sweden and they were returned back to me because they couldn't get through customs. It's sad because we shipped to over 30 countries. Now we ship to the UK, basically.
He accepts governments have to make financial choices, but believes a longer-term cut in VAT and an extension of business rates relief would have given more breathing space to an industry rebuilding from 2 years of turmoil. Gordon Cree, STV News, Callander.
And Gordon's back from Callander now. And Gordon, this all seems like a perfect storm of problems.
Yeah, we all know in our own lives the cost of many things is going up, and that's no different for these businesses. That rates relief has come to an end. Of course, VAT for them during the early stage of the pandemic was cut down to 5%, then 12.5%. It's now back to 20%. The cost of employing people is going up because of national insurance rises. And for some who traditionally had seasonal workers from Europe, that's harder too because of Brexit. And what they can't do is pass all of those costs on to the customers, because the nature of holidays, they're booked in advance and those rates are fixed in.
But there is some reason for optimism.
Yes, like we saw there, a full house. And that's what I heard from many of the tourism businesses. Lots of people are coming to Scotland to visit. And that means, obviously, the businesses are doing well from that. The other thing, particularly with the Americans, the dollar is at a 2-year high in strength against the pound. Now, while that's not great for our economy as a whole, it does mean American visitors here have much more money to spend.
All right, Gordon, thanks very much for joining us.
Well, the cost of living is hitting us all. Inflation is at a 40-year high, and predictions it's only set to increase is having a major impact on household budgets. Everyone is feeling the pinch, and there are fears of what may come in the months ahead. Stephen Brown takes a look at some of the goods that are increasing in price and driving this cost of living crisis.
The cost of living is impacting on almost everyone and everything at the moment, including what we produce on our land. Fuel and fertiliser prices have gone up, and it means overall farming costs have increased by around 30%. And talking of fuel, well, petrol and diesel prices have reached record highs. It means filling up a 55-litre car will now set you back around £100. That's on the back of the oil price soaring because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And if it's going to cost you more in fuel to, say, go to the supermarket, well, it will cost you more when you get there too, because it's predicted that the average annual shopping bill will increase by around £380. And of course that's because individual items are on the up. So if we take, for example, eggs, they've increased by more than 12.5%, poultry 13.5%, and whole milk by around 15%. And just getting up and making your breakfast in the morning is that little bit more expensive. A cup of tea and a couple of slices of toast, well, that's on the up because the electrical appliances have increased, but so too, of course, has the electricity. It's gone up by around 53%. And of course, then there's gas. Now, the economy might not necessarily be cooking on it at the moment, but if you are, or you're heating your home with it, you'll have noticed how much it's gone up. Wholesale prices have come down since the start of the war, but nevertheless, gas prices are up by around 95%. And then there's household goods like sofas. They've increased as well, but not as much as garden furniture, which is up by around a quarter. And if after all of that, you want to sit back, relax, and watch your favourite TV subscription service, well, you guessed it, it's also gone up. And to tackle the rise in inflation, the Bank of England have put up interest rates. That means you'll be paying more if you've got a variable mortgage or if you have borrowings. But it could be good news if you're a saver. There are further price hikes on the horizon, but the concern for families and for firms at the moment is what is coming in the future, particularly the autumn and the winter. The things that are impacting our rising costs at the moment include Brexit, the global economy opening up after COVID, and of course Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But governments and central banks will need to reflect on the measures they have already taken and the challenges that lie ahead to navigate the economy through the choppy waters of the coming months.
Stephen Brown with that report. Now, Anna Sawar says Labour won't strike any deals with the SNP after the next election, even if there's a hung parliament. He was in London today setting out plans to try to counter Nicola Sturgeon's push to hold a second independence referendum next October. Well, live now to our Westminster correspondent Catherine Sampson. And Catherine, these plans also include scrapping the House of Lords.
Yes, Anna Sawar says he wants to abolish the House of Lords. They replace it with an elected Senate of nations and regions. I think really Anna Sawar did not want to be talking much about independence today. He's accused both the SNP and the Conservatives of, in his words, stoking up bitterness, stoking up division for their own gains. He says basically Nicola Sturgeon and Boris Johnson want the same thing, which is, in his view, Labour out of power. Nevertheless, he is trying, I think, to stake a place for Scottish Labour in this debate over Scotland's future. And in the speech that he gave this morning here at Westminster, central to it was the idea that he says he stands for better cooperation between governments rather than conflict. Nevertheless, there are still some difficult questions for Labour when it comes to Scotland. For example, Anas Sarwar today, he backs Sir Keir Starmer's move tonight to say a Labour government wouldn't seek to rejoin the EU. Of course, 63% of people in Scotland voted to remain. Now, in terms of another independence vote, while Labour may be engaging today on the Brexit issue, when it came to me asking Anas Sarwar, well, who might lead our future no campaign if there was a vote in the near future, he didn't seem very keen to engage on that one.
Well, look, there's a lot of steps to go before
we quite like it to be you.
Look, the reality is I want to not pit Scott into different camps. I don't want to entrench half the nation against another half of the nation.
Would you rule it out?
It's very, very kind of you. I tell you what I want to lead. I want to lead a Labour government in the Scottish Parliament.
But you don't rule out leading a no campaign?
Well, look, we are miles away from any kind of process on that. Let that process see its own route. I want to lead a strong, forward, future-looking Labour Party that's focused on the people's priorities, and ultimately I want to lead a Labour Scottish Government.
Could the Prime Minister lead a no campaign?
You're talking about Boris Johnson. I don't think Boris Johnson could run a bath.
Well, the Prime Minister is back in Westminster today after a week away, of course, at the G7 and NATO, after a weekend of brutal headlines about allegations against his former Deputy Chief Whip Chris Pincher, no longer sitting as a Tory MP after allegations he groped two men. That's more ammunition for Tory rebels who might seek to oust Boris Johnson, but it's been quite quiet on that issue from the SNP, who are facing their own calls to block Patrick Grady from returning to the party. Remember, we were told Patrick Grady was stepping aside from his membership of the SNP while police carried out an investigation into sexual harassment allegations against him. That probe was dropped over the weekend, but it's not clear yet whether he'll immediately now seek to rejoin the party and whether he will be accepted.
All right, Catherine, from Westminster, thanks very much.
Well, time now to look at other stories across Scotland. And a teenager has been treated in hospital after being seriously assaulted at a Calvin Harris concert in Glasgow. The 15-year-old boy was taken to the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital following the incident at Hampden Park on Saturday night. His current condition is not known and police are carrying out inquiries.
Train passengers who witness someone being sexually harassed while travelling are being urged to safely intervene as part of a new campaign. British Transport Police hope the Speak Up Interrupt scheme will encourage more people to report what they see. Figures show sexual offences on Scotland's railways have risen by 34% since before the pandemic. Campaigners would also like to see safety measures introduced.
I mean, there's a number of things, and some of it's going to sound quite traditional, but when you're looking at alarms that women can draw attention, I know that they've got information up for texting, but also we need staff on trains. We need women to know that there's a place of safety they can go to, that they can interact with staff, and that staff can recognise where some of those difficulties are.
Thalidomide survivors are to receive lifelong financial support from the Scottish Government. The drug was prescribed to expectant mothers between 1958 and 1961 to relieve morning sickness, but was withdrawn after thousands of babies were born worldwide with disabilities. There are currently 50 known survivors in Scotland.
And farmers met with the UK government today as part of an annual summit to discuss how to solve the growing problem of food security. Participants heard that the UK faces difficult challenges in both producing and delivering food as the cost of living rises and as the war waged by Russia on Ukraine continues. The conference will also look at the effects of climate change on global production and how technology could help provide solutions.
From our primary producers to food manufacturers are seeing just unprecedented levels of rises in their input costs. So in Scotland, we'd established a food security and supply task force to try and look at some of these challenges. But I think that this event today is really key because it's getting the other administrations in the UK together.
We need to be thinking about sustainable agriculture as being a component part of our food security, but also the really important role for technology. And we're here at the James Hutton Institute, a global leader in agricultural technology in many areas with their work on vertical farming and the barley breeding programme that takes place here.
Now, 4 months on from the start of the war in Ukraine, and there doesn't appear to be a clear route to peace. With hopes that negotiations will lead to a breakthrough at some point, researchers at Glasgow University are now taking a look at how to make any agreements made stick, as Greg Ockram has been finding out.
Tanya's getting on with the day-to-day, but her thoughts are elsewhere.
My grandmother, she's got cancer, and we don't know how long she has, but we can go and see them, and then she can't, at the moment, escape just because of her condition.
Her dad and grandmother are still in the city of Mykolaiv, which is being hit by Russian missiles on a daily basis. Her cousin is fighting on the front line near Odessa. His wife, Yulia, and child Miroslava are adapting to life in the east end of Glasgow after fleeing the country. The 4-year-old is attending nursery, but the language barrier makes it hard to fit in.
It's very hard for a child, but everything that she's doing is for a daughter, and they need to get used to it and continue living.
This family's story is just one of many who have had their lives turned upside down in the last 4 months, and returning home is only possible if peace negotiations are successful. Well, researchers in Glasgow and further afield are working on the Peace Treaty Initiative, which would fill a hole in international law and make agreements made during peace negotiations legally binding.
These parties concluded the Minsk peace agreements in 2014 and 2015, but these agreements were not implemented. If we have institutional structures in international law that can support the implementation of peace agreements, these conflicts might be easier to resolve.
Leading the project is Mark Freeman, who has first-hand experience in negotiations in Ukraine.
In a period where violence is escalating, where the war is escalating, it's even harder to make the case for peace talks. It's very unlikely you can reach peace in the first place. You're negotiating with your enemies. There's a lot of anger. There's great distrust. And so if you manage somehow to reach a peace settlement, international law can and must be a friend as much as possible to the sustainability of that agreement.
While the work is gathering pace, it may take a few years before it's used in practice, meaning it may not deliver peace quickly enough for Tanya and her family. Greg Ockram, STV News.
Well, there's a busy week ahead on the music scene with 2 major events being held at Glasgow Green. Guns N' Roses are performing tomorrow night before the Transmit Festival this weekend.
Thousands of people will be there, and they're already being urged to consider how they will get home. ScotRail say there will be no trains running after Transmit finishes on Sunday. Well, Ollie Dickinson is at Glasgow Green, where preparations are already underway. And Ollie, what can people expect?
Well, as you say, Kellyanne, preparations are underway. As you can see behind me, the cordon is up ahead of Guns N' Roses and Transmit. Hundreds of thousands of music fans expected to descend on Glasgow over the course of weeks, starting tomorrow night with the world-famous American rockers and then running on Friday, Saturday and Sunday for Transmit. And as you said, it's already been a busy week for music in Glasgow. Calvin Harris, he played Hampden at the weekend on Saturday night, as did Primal Scream at Bella Houston Park, and all of those concert goers had to get home somehow, and it led to lots of them walking into Glasgow city centre because there simply weren't enough taxis or buses, and there were virtually no, or in some cases none at all, trains. And it looks like it's going to be a very similar story again this week. ScotRail have already said that on Tuesday night, Friday night and Saturday night there will be virtually no trains running after 11 o'clock. In fact, there should be a list of them on the screen for you there just now. But on Sunday night, there won't be any trains leaving Glasgow city centre after 11 p.m. at all. And that, interestingly, is before Lewis Capaldi will have finished on stage here at Transmit, with tens of thousands of fans all looking to find a way to get home. Now, ScotRail say this is all due to the temporary timetable that's in place, and they're urging people to plan ahead.
OK, Ollie, but what about other transport options?
Well, there are buses running, and from my experience on Saturday, they were very busy. As for taxis, well, they're saying make your way to a recognised rank and be prepared for a much longer wait than usual.
All right, Ollie, thanks very much for that.
Glasgow's abandoned ship bar has closed with immediate effect and 14 workers have been made redundant. Staff say they will now struggle to make ends meet after the shock news this morning that they no longer have jobs. It's the latest in a long line of issues facing ailing hospitality group McMurray 300. Staff had hoped their jobs were safe after the company was bought over by Belford Limited less than 2 weeks ago. As Polly Bartlett reports.
Ross should be starting his shift right now, but instead he's collecting his belongings. He woke up to news this morning that he no longer has a job.
Obviously being heavily affected by cost of living, rising prices everywhere, this has really put them in quite the position to, try and make ends meet and try and find another job as soon as possible, which, it's not going to be great for any of us.
Ross is one of 14 workers who've been made redundant. They've been told they will receive a week's pay. The future of several venues across the city operated by hospitality firm McMurray 300 were put in doubt last month after the company brought in the liquidators. But 12 days ago, workers were told their jobs were safe after the business was transferred to a new company called Belford Limited.
They definitely could have given us more notice. It's just a decent thing to do, you would think. The staff here are really hard working and we, just even as people deserve better than that.
It's not the first time Ross and his colleagues have had to speak out against their treatment. In January, workers staged a protest over COVID breaches and raised concerns about the lack of holiday pay and lack of sick pay. The company has also been reported to the pensions regulator. Unite the Union claim that abandoned ships directors have not followed employment law.
We know that they've accrued hundreds of thousands of pounds of tax liabilities. We believe that's why the company had to be liquidated in the first instance. But they are trying to blame workers for standing up for themselves, for asking for radical things like their wages, their holiday pay. That has nothing to do with these redundancies. This is about bad management, but it's also about failure to adhere to the most basic legislation.
The company rejects this, saying the cost of living crisis, COVID aftermath and the shortage of experienced hospitality staff have all played a part. At the moment, their other venues in Glasgow remain open. For workers like Ross, who are now unemployed, today's news is hard to swallow. Polly Bartlett, STV News, Glasgow.
Well, time for the sport now. Here's Rama.
Get your fill of the action. STV Sports, sponsored by Papa John's Pizza.
Good evening. Callum McGregor has described Celtic's early work in the transfer window as excellent and hopes there are more additions to come. The champions have signed Argentinian left-back Alexandro Bernabé, Ben Siegrist and re-signed Cameron Carter-Vickers and Jota. The Parkhead captain says this season the team will need to reach another level, adding it's exciting to be back for the new campaign. Ali McCoist has hailed the bravery of Andy Gorham after being with his former Rangers teammate in the final moments of his life. Gorham died at the weekend at the age of 58, a short while after being diagnosed with terminal cancer. McCoist, who says the former Ibrox #1 is the best keeper he's ever played with, says he showed great bravery throughout his illness and described his passing as tragic. Now, ahead of a huge fortnight for Scottish golf, Paul Lawrie says he doesn't want to be the last Scot to win the Open. His victory in 1999 remains the last time a Scot claimed a major, and he's hopeful one of his countrymen can finally lift the famous claret jug at St Andrews next week. Here's Ivana Holland.
It's one of the most sought-after pieces of silverware in sport, and the claret jug is touring the capital as part of its 150th anniversary ahead of next week's Open, an event this former champion is relishing the chance to play in again.
I mean, I'm only 53, I get till I'm 60, as a past winner to play in the tournament, so I'd be amazed if I didn't play for the next 7, events or runnings of the Open, but I won't play many more. I wouldn't have said, I always said that I wouldn't play if I didn't feel competitive. I'm not that kind of person. I wouldn't take a spot in the field that I didn't feel as though I could play certainly all 4 rounds.
Paul Lawrie remains the last Scot to have won a major. A very unhappy record for a country that gave birth to this sport. But how does he think his fellow countrymen will fare in the Open?
I mean, I don't want to be the last Scottish winner of the Open. I want somebody to do it. I'd like somebody to do it every year. But let's hope that one of us can have a really good week, and you just never know what's going to happen. We're a small country. There's a lot of people around the world that are all very, very good at this game now. We have got some talent coming through, I've got no doubt about that. And obviously Bob McIntyre is the highest ranked Scot on the world rankings, and he came through the system, of Scottish golf. So we need more Bob McIntyre.
Unbelievable. It's a dream come true. I've never played a major or an Open before, so to have my first one at St Andrews it'll be amazing.
This week will see 9 of the world's top 10 golfers appear at the Scottish Open, as the last 3 spots of qualification for next week are up for grabs. Ivana Holland, STV News.
Folks, that is all sport for me tonight. I'll see you again tomorrow.
Get your fill of the action. STV Sports, sponsored by Papa John's Pizza.
Well, it's weather time now, and how's it faring for the rest of the week? Here's Sean to tell us.
A light drizzle is coming in from the west. TUI Blue Hotels sponsor STV Weather.
Well, I thought we'd start off by having a look at some of the trends for this week. The worst spot to be here, probably across Argyll through this week. Here we're going to see outbreaks of rain on and off through much of the week, especially on Wednesday. We'll have windy conditions on Wednesday as well. And look at our highs and the minimum temperatures, 13 and 12. Really not much change between day and night. Temperatures rising a wee bit later on in the week. But the most significant rise, the best of the weather, probably across lights of Glasgow, North Lanarkshire, Falkirk, Clackmannanshire. Very little rainfall around here. Still some over the next couple of days. Wettest day probably again Wednesday. Dip in temperatures, 14 degrees a high Wednesday. Again feeling chilly, rather light today in that wind, but temperatures climbing into the low 20s, maybe even the mid 20s in some spots later in the week and also into the weekend. That is central and eastern parts. Now tonight's going to be a bit of a nippy one. Certainly again for July, temperatures down to about 7 degrees in some spots. Most of the showers though should ease away. Now tomorrow morning, not a bad start to the day. A lot of dry sunny weather, but across the Hebrides we'll have thickening cloud here, and that cloud creeping its way eastwards through the afternoon. Outbreaks of rain coming into the Highlands, Argyll, also Ayrshire by the end of the afternoon. Temperatures here once again very disappointing, 14, 15, 18 degrees in the east. We've got that cool, windy, wet weather around during Wednesday, especially in the west. A little bit better for Thursday and Friday. Bye-bye.
TUI Blue Hotels sponsor STV Weather.
Poor Sean's always getting questioned about our rubbish weather, isn't he?
And if he gets it wrong about it hotting up, you know what they say? Just blame it on the weatherman.
Exactly. From all of us here, bye-bye.
Good night.